Hello, everybody. Welcome to this installment of the Anti-Racist Capoeira Instruction Speaker Series. The purpose of this series is to amplify and archive the work of instructors that are doing conscious education and hopefully provide a path forward to a better future. I'm really excited today. We have Guerreiro with us, and my co-host Sigaha is here as well. I am Boa. I'm from Jingarchi Capoeira. So, Guerreiro, usually our intros are pretty short because we get straight into the meat of things, but I think that I really want to get into the details of like who you are and like what the work is that you're doing, because I think it's really important to understanding everything that's going on, not only with you personally, but nationally.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Guerreiro. My name is Ira Weatherspoon. I am a Minnesota native, born and raised here for the most part. I'm 33. I am a Black man. I am a child abuse survivor. I am a sexual abuse survivor. I have been orchestrating and organizing some different supply and relief funds and community aid for the last, the crazy thing is like I'm losing track of time. I don't know exactly how long this has been going on anymore. But I've been out South Minneapolis, as well as some areas of St. Paul, and just trying to do what I can to help people. Right now, a lot of my focus is on a place called Powderhorn Park in South Minneapolis, where we have several hundred people without homes who need a lot of help and support. So that's where a lot of my attention is these days. I don't know like anything else that you wanted me to mention in that, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
So I guess my question is that how did you get involved with everything that's happening? Because you got super active at the start when George Floyd was murdered, so for people that don't know, George Floyd was murdered like in your neighborhood, like in the place you call home, and you've been on the ground since then. So how did that happen? How'd you get involved with all of that?
The thing is like you said, like this is my neighborhood. I got involved with a few different people. At first, it was just a few of us living in the neighborhood who wanted to make sure that the neighborhood was safe. Mm-hmm. So quite a few of us took to the streets. Protests were going on, and then there was a lot of the riots and the looting. And we formed our own patrol teams to make sure that the areas, that we could protect were protected. So then I got an opportunity to work along AIM Patrol, which is the American Indian movement, and as well as the Minnesota Freedom Riders, and then a bunch of locals. Some of us were fortunate enough, myself, to not ever get hit with any of the rubber bullets, but quite a few of my friends were not so fortunate. So I got involved just because, one, I've been doing a lot of community outreach in the area anyway. So a lot of people knew me from that. And then having a bunch of different resources available to me from dance and from martial arts and from just performing, and then being an event organizer and party planner by profession. So that's kind of how it happened, really. It was just something needed to be done, and I was able to do something. So that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't like I got a phone call or anything like that. It was just like, hey, walk out the door and there's this craziness going on. It's up to us to fix it.
It's been so wild from just like, because I'm also doing mutual aid stuff, and there's two types of people that are involved right now. There's the people who had to go out looking for ways to get involved, and there's the people who were already there, like for my community, it's like, well, we were already doing the work. So when all of this happened, it wasn't like random people calling. It was like my neighbors. It was, you know, people that I've been working with for years, people that are my friends, you know, and it's been interesting for me to see that divide. And I'm really excited that you agreed to let us interview you, because I think it's really important to talk to people who are like actually there. Because so many people, they don't know anybody that's at kind of the ground zero of all of this. You know, they see, if you're conservative, you see one image in the media. If you're liberal, you see another image. But like, you're an actual human who's there. I guess, could you kind of tell me, like, I'm sure that there's a few things that you, being someone who's on the ground, see, and when you see the same story reflected in mainstream media, you're like, that's not what happened. Is there anything that you'd like to just clarify for the audience of, because we have you here?
So yeah, I mean, there's plenty. You know, I was on the local news, a few different news stations out here to kind of correct a few things already, and I think a few things that I want to make sure that people really do understand. I know if you follow me on Facebook, you probably maybe saw some of my live feeds, but if you didn't, maybe here's an opportunity for you to understand a few things that that I myself saw with my own eyes, and it's not just something that was just, you know, rumors spread around. But I want to just go back to like the first few days where you're hearing reports of like the Minneapolis residents are burning the city down. Those statements are so untrue. I'm not going to say, I can't sit here and say that nobody in Minneapolis or St. Paul participated in the riots or the looting. Can't say that, because that's not true. But as far as burning down the local stores and all of that stuff, as you can see, I'm wearing this security shirt. And the reason why is because I've been doing security in Minneapolis. I've been doing patrol at night in Minneapolis. And we saw a lot of out-of-state license plates. You know, we saw a lot of trucks, SUVs. I mean, from there was like Massachusetts plates I saw, some Tennessee plates, and this is South Minneapolis. This isn't like the big city or the, you know, where you might get a few people, some tourists, and you're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's not a lot of like out-of-towners just coming through in their big SUVs and stuff like that. But they're coming to like the kind of the poorer neighborhoods, and it's like, well, these trucks, they don't belong here. So yes, there were a lot of out-of-towners. Also, you probably heard maybe in the news that a lot of people who were arrested doing a lot of the rioting and the looting had Minnesota addresses. Minnesota is a whole state. It's not just one tiny town. It's a lot of people, okay? So yes, some of them had Minnesota addresses, but we're talking like Hopkins. We're talking like, you know, St. Cloud, I believe it was, and like just places that are like way north of the Twin Cities, or west of the Twin Cities. So it wasn't the local residents burning down their own stores and their own businesses. Like we wouldn't do that. That's why there's so many barricades in different areas to keep people out who are just unfamiliar. And that's really hard because we get a lot of out-of-town support and out-of-town help as well. So then it's like, who do we let in and who do we not let in? And it can be really confusing at times. So then it's kind of like operated like a business almost. These are business hours. These are the hours in which you can be here, and these are the hours in which you cannot.
Yeah. Well, I really love that, because it's been amazing to me how quickly self-governance has emerged. You know, like when these things are going, I feel like people get this idea when you just throw people together that they are like chaotic and like can't organize anything of their own accord. But it's like everything that I've seen shows that like when you get people together, within like an hour, some form of self-governance starts emerging, some form of like, let's do this in a way that makes sense. Let's, you know, put this person on this role, this person on this role. So really cool to hear that that's been happening as well. I did want to bring this all into capoeira. So this series is about, the intersection of anti-racist work and capoeira. So I feel like some people are activists in one sphere of your life. You have always been someone that has stood up wherever the problem is. And you had an incident. Please feel free to talk in as much vaguity or detail as you like. But you had an instance which you had to take a very strong stance in the capoeira community against violence that was being done by someone. Do you want to talk in whatever way you choose about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can. It was, public information, so it's not a secret or anything. Yeah, a few years ago, I had an event here in Minnesota, and I will leave names out of this because I know that there are people who really don't want this spotlight on them. But there was an incident where one of our female guests was violated. And I'm trying to make sure, I'm trying to figure out exactly what I can share from this. But one of the female guests was violated. One guest instructor grabbed the back of her shirt and tucked it into her pants. Well, obviously, so his hands were in her pants, which is extremely inappropriate.
Yeah.
No matter, and I'll say this too, no matter where you're from, culturally, or your background, whatever, that's just not okay. You just can't do that. Even if you mean well, I think the best way to go about doing that is just to inform them, hey, little backstory is, her shirt wasn't tucked in, so part of her underwear was showing. And so he took it upon himself to tuck her shirt in for her. And that is major no-no, right? And so she immediately left, leaving a few of her belongings behind. I was not aware of the situation. I was doing other things at the event at the time, but there were a few others who did see it. Nobody told me right away. I didn't find out until the next day. The event was over. That guest instructor was already back home. I remember I called the person that this happened to. I called her because I thought one of the articles of clothing that we found, it was a sweatshirt, belonged to somebody from her group. And I knew her number, and I wanted to see if she could get that back to them. She informed me that it was hers, and then she told me what happened and how, and she left in such a rush that she left it there. From that point on, I've been, we created a new code of conduct for our school that we make everybody sign. Doesn't matter who it is. Actually, at my last event last year, I had to pull a friend of mine out of the Hada because he walked in without me seeing. He came in late and just jumped into the Hada, and before he could buy into the game, I grabbed him and hey, I need you to sign this form. And he was really upset about it because I think he was partially embarrassed, but it's no. Nobody participates without signing this contract. This is an agreement between you, the school, and all these people here that everyone here is going to do everything in our abilities to keep everyone else safe. If you can't agree to that and you can't sign, then you can't participate. You can sit and watch, but you cannot join us. We've hosted a few events and helped other people put on some events to kind of help push that idea, because we found out in that moment that a lot of people didn't have something like that in place. Their own groups in their own schools or events. And I hope I said all of that without giving any personal information of anybody else. But as far as the code of conduct that we have, it allows us, one, like if you break that agreement, that like you understand that there will be legal actions taken against you, both by whoever you victimized and by my school, because it's just something that we will not tolerate.
Yeah. It's so difficult to figure out like where the legal system fits in with, you know, like keeping people safe. And I know that like there's people on all sides of it, but it's like, this is the action that you take. And I do appreciate that you're aggressive as you are about getting people to sign it, because a lot of the times everybody's been in that like work mandated training, right? Where it's like, well, sign this form saying you won't be a terrible human. And then everybody just kind of gives each other like, yeah, I know, I skipped through the training too. But like, I want to center that like, you're really on top of it. Like, no, this is, you walk in the door, you're interacting with this information. You know, we are setting the tone as like, we protect our students here. And it's not like you didn't face backlash for this. Like, you had to leave your group, and it's really terrible, but I almost wish that folks had been more proactive, because more stuff came out about that particular person later that may have been avoided if people had just been like, okay, you did this thing, you're not coming back, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was gonna say that it reminds me of this anti-oppression training that I recently did for my job. We get trained every year, and you know, people think of it as, oh, you're just being nice. These code of conduct, like it's the nice thing to do, it's the polite thing to do, but it's actually the law. You know, like there's human rights law that dictate these guidelines that we follow, where we respect each other's bodily autonomy, consent, these types of things. Like it's the law. It's not just being nice or the right thing to do. It's actually very serious. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
It's an interesting point too, because how often does niceness and so like human rights get conflated? Like, oh, you're so nice, you respected, you know, this human being as a person. That's so good of you. It's like, no, niceness doesn't actually have as much of a place in doing the right thing as one might think. Sometimes you got to fight your friends. That is a thing that sometimes you have to talk to people in ways that you don't want to talk to them because they did something that was not right, you know? And it's just like, niceness really only gets us so far. I want to pivot a little bit. Sigaha had some questions about the actual protests that are going on. So you want to?
So for my question, many people have the privilege of being so distant to violence in their own lives. So they haven't had to think about the actual martial aspect of capoeira. So maybe going to a protest is actually the first time they've witnessed real violence. And I just wanted to also talk about a quote from Mestre Bimba. It's from the documentary Capoeira Iluminada. Mestre Bimba's words are: Capoeira não foi feito para betar capoeiristas. Capoeira e para betar tolos. So that is translated to mean that capoeira is not for fighting. It's not made to fight capoeiristas. It's made to fight fools. So, you know, there's speculation around the validity of capoeira as self-defense in actual situations of physical violence. And we were wondering if you could speak to that in terms of the value of capoeira in self-defense, and especially in the case where one might be outnumbered. If you can share your experiences and speak to some of this.
Yeah, and that's a very that's like a big thing around capoeira as far as the martial arts community. I go to a lot of martial arts conventions, and like that's one of the things you hear about capoeira is like, you know, it's impractical, or it's not martial art, like, you know, and maybe some of that's a little bit of our fault, because, you know, like when we talk about it, we call it a game, and it's and because of its dance-like aspects and the music and stuff like that, so people don't really take the time to really delve deeper into the actual art form to figure out like what it really is, what it's about, what we actually do, I can say that I've used capoeira on a few occasions to defend myself in real life settings, not just in the roda, but like when my life was in danger or somebody else's life was in danger. I'll talk about one of them, and the reason why I'll talk about this one is because there were many witnesses. So like if anybody questions like, oh, this is just some made up story, like no, ask around. There were at least, I want to say there were probably at least 80 people who saw it. My school, at our old building, we would do an 8-week community outreach thing where we would every Wednesday we would partner with an organization called YouthWorks, and they would send us their youth, and we would get out these big barbecue grills, and we would grill food for the homeless people in the community. On one of those days, one year, and I don't remember which year it was, but one year there was a gentleman who was there, and he was using a lot of profanity, like very loudly, and another gentleman told him, you know, hey, this is a community thing. There's a lot of youth here, a lot of kids here. It's inappropriate to use that kind of language. You know, don't talk like that. And he took great offense to this, and he also had a cane with him. I don't know why, but he had a cane. And so he walked over to the guy, and they're arguing. I had my daughters with me, and I didn't have anyone next to us at the time, so I had to wait for someone just like sit with my daughters so I can go deal with this. And then before I had an opportunity to get close enough, the guy took his cane and just cracked the other guy over the head. He's bleeding pretty badly. And then he drew back again. So I was like, okay, he's gonna hit him again. Like by this time, I'm a lot closer. So he draws back. So he's got the side completely open to me. It was like, oh, this is, like kind of great for me. I step in underneath his arm and just give him a nice vingativa. He goes down. As he's falling down, I reach back and grab the cane out of his hand, put it back at him, like, okay, so you can get up and you can leave, or we can do this another way. He opted to just get up and leave, which was, probably good for him. And then we had some medics and some police officers arrived to help the guy who was victimized. I should point out, this day was the day. It was only minutes before Philando Castile was shot. This was actually it was on the same street, now that I think about it. Because we were on Charles Avenue. So this right down the street, if you go just a few minutes east, that shooting took place only minutes after that.
Holy crap, dude.
So.
God, y'all have been through so much here. Sorry, but to go back into the actual to go back to the question is, I think it's interesting because, and maybe you can juxtapose the difference between that interaction being handled by a community member and literally what happened down the street. So like you, as somebody who knows this martial art that was built for, dealing in situations where you want to disarm somebody, you want to negate the threat, you want to either get away or put someone down very quickly and get on to the next person that's attacking you if you're being attacked by many people. I think it's so interesting that from your mindset, you're like, de-escalate, it's de-escalated, you need to leave, and it's like full stop. And then on the other hand, you have somebody who's literally trained to escalate a situation. And I think people get really, how pessimistic when they think about what a world with less police looks like, right? That's what, like what you just said, that's what a world with less police looks like. You were able to respond immediately. Because think as well, like when you have police responding, if everybody had just stepped back and said, I'm not getting involved in this, this is not my problem, how much damage could that guy have done before an officer could have got there? Who would that officer have damaged when they got there? Like there's, I think, real value in like using these concrete examples of times when it's worked, you know, like times when community stepping in has solved the problem. And like there was no need to bring an officer with a gun because the situation had already been neutralized. He just needed to get put on his butt, and then he escorted himself out, and that was the end of it. And you were able to focus on the person that was harmed without putting someone else in the situation who, as we've seen, we had an instance in Chicago when a mother called for help for her son. Police showed up and shot not only her son, but the elderly woman that lived downstairs. Like it's, I love that we can have, I love that you gave me that example of just what this could look like, because I think people, I've said it before, I'll say it a million times, have a crisis of imagination of like what a society with less police in it looks like. And like, that's what it looks like. It looks like a community event that there was this instance, you were able to handle it and you're able to move on. And I think that that kind of makes me want to ask, in general, like when we talk about this crisis of imagination for what the world looks like with less police, we're actually seeing, you're seeing it where you are, I'm seeing it where I'm at, you know, of just the best in people coming out. Like there has been less police intervention. There's real conversations about like, can we safely call police if we have all of these instances where police are called to help and they end up escalating the situation. So I think a lot of people think like, oh, if we defund the police, it's just going to be chaos and people are going to be running wild in the streets. They're going to be murdering each other rampantly, like murder has never happened without police intervention. Like, you know, so it's like, yeah. But on the contrary, right? I think we were talking earlier about a gentleman who has been named publicly, so I'm giving his name and people wanted to look up more information. But can you tell me about Terrell Bryant and just the really almost textbook example of community intervention that happened with the, just, yeah, I don't want to read anything.
So Terrell came from, I believe, Hopkins to 38th in Chicago with South Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered. And again, he came on the third day of the protesting and the riots and all of that stuff, right? And his depiction of like what was going on there was what the media put out there. So he believed that the city of Minneapolis, all the residents of Minneapolis were just going, you know, it was the wild, wild west and there were no rules. It was utter chaos and mayhem and anarchy. And so he came to Minneapolis with the intention to murder a cop. His idea was he was going to assault a police officer, attempt to kill him, and hope that the police officer or officers killed him in the process. And the backstory behind that is he had lost his job during this, this crazy COVID time. He'd been separated from his family, his daughters. He'd lost his home. And he had just gotten into an argument with his sister, who he was staying with at the time in Hopkins. So he was a guy who just like, for him, it was like the worst situation possible. Just down on his luck, felt like he had nothing to lose. Yeah. So he came with the intention of having a cop murder him. And when he got there, what he saw was not what was being reported. He saw a community of people taking care of each other. He saw me out there passing out diapers and food and all kinds of stuff to people who needed it. He saw, there was one of the stores out there that was boarded up, donated 2 porta potties. Now you have to imagine there are like hundreds of people who are trying to keep the area secure, people coming to pay their respects, all that stuff. And there were 2 porta potties. So then the community comes together, and a lady in the community, who I will name in a second because her story and Terrell's story are actually tied very close together. But then she ends up, I don't know if she wants me to spread this information, actually, now I think about it, but I'm gonna do it anyway because she deserves to be recognized for it. But she donated or paid for an additional 15 porta potties. So then we had 17 porta potties.
Nice.
Her and I worked very closely together on sanitation, getting the city to come out and do sanitation on a daily basis versus a weekly basis. Because with that many people, the garbage, the amount of like waste and you know, because we're bringing in trying to get fresh produce in, there was so many things that were spoiling, or so many things like, you know, orange peels and banana peels and all that stuff that's getting, you know, left out to rot in the sun, and it's starting to smell bad. So, so her and I worked sanitation, and then, but this woman, or I'm sorry, Terrell, came and saw a woman being harassed by some anti-Black Lives Matter protesters. So he decided that he was going to protect her until you know, she was safe, or until she felt safe. And he stuck around her until then. And then people were asking kind of who he was, because it was like nobody recognized him. It's like, oh, he's not a local. Who is this guy? And you know, he told him his story a little bit. And then this woman, her name is Julia Eagles. Her and her partner decided that he could come and just stay in their house.
But it never got to the point of him actually interacting with the cop.
There were no cops at 38th in Chicago, at least not during the daytime. The first 2 nights we had police in the area, and they were coming to push, you know, to shut everything down. And that's when like a lot of us were getting hit with the rubber bullets and the tear gas. After that, we had no more interactions with the police. We barricaded. We had a bus. We had grocery carts, crates, anything that we could push together and create a wall. That's what we used to create walls, to keep them out, because they were the ones escalating the issues. And anybody else who meant to do anyone in that area harm. So we closed off those 4 city blocks, and we didn't allow people in who didn't belong there. So no, he had no interaction with the police because the police weren't there. You know, like I said, he arrived on day 3. So it's a kind of different scenario by that point.
That's really incredible as well. So in restorative justice, we talk about how we are all greater than the worst thing that we've ever done. And when you originally told me the story, I thought he actually was pulled back from assaulting the cop himself. But I think it's even more interesting because when we talk about people, right? In kind of mainstream media, there's this idea that there are humans and there are criminals, and the criminals are animals and they don't deserve anything and they have no potential and they are monsters. Obviously very, very, very coded. Like when people say the word thug, we all know what they mean. It's a dog whistle. We all know what they mean. But I think it's really interesting because let's just analyze that interaction real quick, right? So Terrell came with bad intentions. He saw an instance where somebody was in danger and he intervened, right? So he went immediately from being like a criminal to like the hero of that narrative, you know? And it's like, I don't think people who haven't spent time in communities are comfortable with how quickly people can switch between the roles of being the good guy versus the bad guy. Like perhaps there's not good guys and bad guys, there's just people, you know? And so when you give it that context, like he came with the intention to murder a cop. There were no cops around. With just a little bit of community intervention, you guys were able to literally pivot him from actual murder into being a part of a community that was showing him support and love and helping guide him through that extremely painful time. You know, like there's no justification for, I lost my job, I'm gonna go kill somebody, duh. But if we're like, we're not even gonna work with those people, we're not even gonna work with people who aren't processing the things in their lives well, Like where exactly are we going to get? Are you just going to lock up everyone that's ever done anything ever? Like that's not, are we just going to lock up people with bad thoughts? Like, no, like people are able to pivot very quickly between these different roles. And I think that that's like part of the beauty and like the also like scary part of humans is that we can fill these different roles depending on like what we have around us. And it's just so contextual. And I think about that a lot with the Capoeira community, you know, like when you have just a normal American like community that's not Capoeira, it's very much like if somebody from like my Tai Chi community came and was like, hi, I don't know you. Can I stay at your house for a week and have you show me around and like introduce me to your family and like do all these things? I'd be like, no, get out of here. But in Capoeira, like that's so normal. We have events and we have all these people in our houses that we're just like, I've never met you before. Welcome to my home. Here's my dog and children. Please, like, you know, make yourself at home. It's just such a different tone. And I think that the tone that we set like in the communities that we're a part of dictates a lot of the behavior. Terrell interacted with a community that had set the tone at we're going to love and support each other, you know? And so I'm wondering from your perspective, like in all that you're doing, in also being part of this Capoeira community that's very abnormal in the intimacy that we have with other folks, like is there connections between those communities, what you're doing now and the Capoeira community that just like have stood out to you really, really aggressively when you've been doing this work?
Yeah, definitely. I think one that you just mentioned is a major one, you know, because Terrell's not the only story where somebody had to stay in somebody else's house. Like I said, when we were on patrol, there were times when we were, those first few nights, we were not only getting shot at with live ammunition from like crazy people who were coming into the town from nowhere, and then getting shot at with like tear gas and rubber bullets from the police. And so like sometimes you had to go run and hide, and it would be like some person in the community just opens their door, like, come in. And you take cover in somebody's house that you probably don't know. And they just take care of you for a couple hours until you're like, all right, I got to get back out there because there's people out there and they mean to do other people harm, or they mean to burn this down. Or so that was a huge one, that at least that I saw. Another are the committee meetings that we have, and the way that they're ran. Like we get together, we actually sit in a circle too. But a lot of the elders in those communities, you know, Indigenous American and Afro-American, sitting down and talking with us about their experiences in the civil rights movement, their experiences just in general with police brutality, kind of giving their wisdom, their insight, their information, and resources that they may have or they know about, and then kind of putting those ideas on those younger minds and those fresh legs to kind of carry on those practices or those and gain those connections to those resources so that they can then take that and, you know, move this into this new generation in hopes that we actually see systemic change on a grand scale. So I think that not different from the bate-papos that we always have, you know, you're sitting down in front of a bunch of different messages from, you know, from Bahia or you know, having them share their wisdom and their insight, their information, their stories, answering questions and things of that nature. So that's another pretty big one there. But again, I think the really big one is that strong sense of community, that like you belong, and you'll be taken care of by the community. I think that's like the major one.
I think like I'm still thinking of the impact of media in terms of setting that expectation, and just the way that Boa framed that in the Capoeira community, that expectation is kind of set already, and we like self-manage. And act accordingly kind of thing. So it's really awesome to see the example there, that in real life where that worked out in a more dangerous situation, you know. So I think I'm gonna move on to my next question. So, you know, in your organizing, you've been really fortunate to have daily meetings and access to folks who were present and active during the first civil rights movement. This relationship calls for careful balance between the wisdom and experience of the elders and the leadership of younger folks. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, like there's a lot of wisdom in what they experience and what they know, and I think there's a lot of there's got to be a lot of communication, but trust in that community to where you can even feel like you can share those experiences, right? With someone you don't know or don't know very well. You don't really know who has the best intentions or even the same intentions. So there's got to be a lot of trust in there. As far as the leadership in the young ones, though, it's really inspiring to see, honestly, or be a part of, because with the younger minds, it comes with these new ideas, new I wouldn't say new technologies exactly, but just their understanding of like what is available to them that a lot of the older minds don't really know about or don't really think about or care about. This civil rights movement is large because the internet exists. You know what I mean? And in this time, I mean, that's why we're on the what is this? This is the largest civil rights movement in world history.
It's wild to hear you say that. I love
like I mean, think about how far this has spread because of those young leaders who were like who seen this and like, you know what, the last generation already they had enough. I haven't experienced it as long as they have, and I've already had enough, and we're going to do whatever we can to not only spread their message but share our stories and uplift each other in this generation. I applaud Generation Z for their like the way that they're doing. Like the TikTokers are like going crazy the way that they're actually spreading this information and giving lessons on how to like better your life and understand systemic oppression and things of that nature. It's like crazy to see like, oh, this is, because even I thought like TikTok was like this thing for kids, and then but all these kids are like, they're like activists on TikTok, and it's like, that's crazy. But I think it's really cool to see that create that kind of dynamic where you take that wisdom from some of the people who experienced in the first civil rights movement, and you share that with the younger mind who says, okay, how can we take what you know, use what we have, and make this stronger, make this a more powerful movement where your voice, your stories from then are still going to be heard. And that is, it's been really incredible to see and be a part of. I don't know if that answers your question, but
well, no, it certainly does. It's making me think of just the overlaps between the relationships we have with the elders in the Capoeira community, and the relationship between, so for instance, like the elders you've worked with, there's definitely a connection with that relationship, and the one that is between the older Capoeira mestres and the younger folks in the community. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk about some lessons you think that we can learn from Minneapolis as a Capoeira community.
Lessons learned from Minneapolis. I think.
And I'm sorry if I wasn't too clear, just in terms of the relationship that you've fostered with the elders and some of what you've talked about with the younger folks, the younger activists. and also using the wisdom and experience of the elders. So, you know, how can we borrow some of what you've experienced in the capoeira world?
Got it. Or at least I think I got it. But okay, so I think that that very open sense of communication again, and trust between the two, understanding that there are going to be capoeira is this ever evolving art form, and we're going to want to hold on to some things and try to keep that exactly the same in the name of tradition. And there's nothing really wrong with that, right? But at the same time, because capoeira keeps evolving, understanding that these newer minds, these younger minds are going to utilize some of these newer resources that you didn't have back then. And so I guess this part is for the mestres, right? That's not a problem. It might not be a problem. It could be a problem depending on what they actually do with those resources. But allowing them to kind of use those strengths. Everybody has a strength that a skill that they bring to the table. And there's nothing wrong with utilizing those strengths to make what you do better. I think that that's a big thing that some people resist in capoeira, that I think maybe should be met with a little more understanding and patience. And then as far as the other side, understanding too that some of these traditions are very, very important, and we don't be in such a rush to try to change everything. I think that there's a lot of again, new information and new resources, and you want to take capoeira into the new, for the new generation, it's going to be this or that or whatever, and that's cool. But in the process, over time, we've seen, or at least I know that I've seen, where people are completely erasing certain traditions that belong in capoeira. Otherwise, it's, in my opinion, not necessarily really capoeira anymore. Where you're seeing my fitness program, it's like, look at my capoeira fitness program. It's like, well, capoeira is not like a fitness program. This is a cultural art form, and there are health benefits doing capoeira, and not just physical, but to label it or to promote it or advertise it as like this great workout, and you're going to lose this much weight, and you join this, and you're going to do this and shed these pounds and this and that, and that's like their main objective. And I know that it's like, you think like, well, that's good marketing, and that's true, I suppose, but is that what capoeira is for? Is that what it's about? And the answer, just so you know, is no, it's not. So,
what? Shocking reveal. Capoeira is not for fitness. It's a deep cultural art. What?
So just understanding that although these messages can sometimes maybe hold on to some ideas a little just too hard, that there's a reason why they're holding on to them.
Yeah.
Because they mean something to a lot of people, myself included. So I think that that's something that both sides could really work on.
Did you have any? We're coming up on, I think that's a really beautiful message to end on, which is great because we're also at the end of our time. Is there any closing thoughts that you guys want to like throw out there before we do our little wrap up?
I'll let you first.
You got anything?
I'm just still reflecting on all of the comparisons with the present day movements that we're seeing on the streets, and the way that we create space for community in capoeira. I think it's so awesome to see, we think of capoeira as being rooted in anti-oppression and resistance, with the cultural element. So I feel like that liberation theme is in Capoeira, but I don't really see it talked about present day. So I think it's really beautiful to draw those connections. And thank you so much for sharing with us, what your life experiences are outside of the hall, and then also with your group, you create space that respects your principles as a person, and not just a capoeira. So that's just my final thoughts. I just think it's so beautiful, the discussion.
It's like when I look at the things that are happening now, I feel like capoeiristas, if you want to be true to capoeira, you have to stand up when people are being harmed, like full stop, At least that's what I've been told by the mestres that I respect, and from everything I've learned from studying history, is like you have to stand up. That's the gift of this art. It was how it was born in the form that it is, and it's the obligation to continue it. I wanted to give people ways to follow up with you. So most of your posts are public, right, on Facebook?
Yep.
Like your lives. So what's your Facebook info? If people wanted to follow you to get more up-to-date information from on the ground, is that something that they could do? I actually don't know if you have other social media. I know you have your Facebook, but what's the best way for people to follow you to get this kind of information on the ground?
Yeah, I think Facebook is probably going to be the best way right now, because I don't put a whole lot out on Instagram, just because I'm not overly familiar with Instagram still.
Scary.
But so yeah, I mean the lives and all that information I post typically to Facebook. My name on Facebook is Guerreiro Weatherspoon. It's just my apellido or my last name. Weatherspoon is spelled Weatherspoon. Yeah, that would probably be the best way to get information from like me and what's going on the ground in South Minneapolis. So yeah, I think that would be the best way.
And then I know that it sucks, but people's attentions are kind of waning right now, and you're probably not getting the support that you were when
Definitely not.
Yeah. It's kind of like people are starting to go back to their daily lives and being like, well, that was fun, that thing that we did, standing up for human rights. But if people don't want to fall complacent in this moment, what are some initiatives that you're working on right now? You mentioned Powderhorn specifically, but what are some initiatives, and then what are other ways that they can support you directly?
As far as supporting me directly, so for the people because a lot of people have been asking me what they can do for me specifically, I'm okay. So you don't need to do anything for me. As far as supporting the work that I'm doing, if you can send supplies, that's great. But a lot of people can't do that because they're at a distance. You can Venmo me and we will go get supplies. We have a team of people who will do that. I'll do it myself if no one's available. So you can Venmo me, and my Venmo is at CapMSP, CAPM as in Mary, SP. And as far as any other initiatives, kind of drawing a blank here, but
Well, if people wanted as well to get supplies, we actually in Chicago, I'm with Social Practice Labs, which is an organization, and we have the capacity to get supplies to you. So if people wanted to directly send supplies, just get at me, and I'll loop you through our volunteer network so we can get stuff sent up to you. We're doing camping supplies right now, but what's some other stuff that if we could just throw a bunch of stuff in a car and send it your way?
So camping supplies are a major thing for the homeless encampments in Powderhorn. So we need like medical supplies as well.
Yeah.
Food is like non-perishable food is still good. But then we need, like, if you're gonna send like canned goods, we also need can openers, batteries for things like lanterns and flashlights, portable fans, like the battery operated ones, like D batteries and C batteries. Feminine hygiene products are a big thing. If you can get reusable ones, that's even better. We had somebody sent us some, and I don't remember who that was. I think it was somebody in Denver, Colorado. Appreciate you. And those seem to be working really well. You know, I don't go live there because that's like basically going into someone's living room and start doing broadcasting a video there. But I do put the supply like list up on my Facebook as well, because I'm not going to remember every single item off that list, and they need more than I'm going to be able to say.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully we can work together and get some stuff sent up to you ASAP. I really appreciate you doing this interview, man. I know that it's like times are hard, energies are low, but it was really important, I think, to get this connection out. And I just want to reiterate that there's so much value in talking directly to folks in your extended community that are in these places, which is another thing that we have in Capoeira. We have like a friend in like almost feels like every city. So I'm just really grateful that you made the time for this. And yeah, hopefully next time we talk, some rights will have been won, some battles will be over. Stay strong until then, my friend, and talk soon, hopefully.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.